is Sarah.
Thank you very much, Rashmi, and thank you, Elliot, for kindly reminding me how lovely my hair looked pre-lockdown. Can't wait for a haircut. Fab, so you lucky lot are going to be listening to a debut talk that I have just written, so please be kind, and we will kick off in just a second. Okay, so a couple of questions to start off my talk this evening. So how many of you sitting here tonight want more money? Show of hands. Yeah, that's what I thought the answer might be. And how many of you regularly teach, if you've got any children, teach your children about money? Okay. And how many of you can sort of truly hand on your heart say that you categorically and, you know, kind of know and understand how to make more money consistently and build a sort of sustained generational wealth? Okay, a few, yeah. So I think I'd probably be right in saying, just judging by the room, that probably most of you here today, the answer is yes, you all definitely want more money, of course, who doesn't? But, you know, if you've got kids, probably, you know, you're not teaching your children about money because, let's be honest, you probably don't know truly, for the most people in the world, how to create more money and build kind of sustained long-term wealth. What a lot of you probably don't know, and it still shocks me every time I say this, is the total personal debt in the UK currently stands at £1.6 trillion. And that's definitely not okay, and I'm sure we'll all be in agreement with that. And more interestingly, actually, the average household debt for 2020 currently stands at £60,000, but yet the average income is only £29,500. So how can that possibly work? And it's a fact, actually, that in the UK, we don't currently have anything at all in our sort of schooling system that teaches kids at all from a young age about money or investment or any sort of wealth building techniques. And what we kind of do is this weird thing where we wait until they're 18 and then we just bombard them with like an array of high financial interest products like credit cards and loans, etc. And we just basically set them up for a lifelong failure of overspending and living beyond the means. And that was certainly the case for me. So when I was 18, I left school and I went to work at Yorkshire Bank, and my mum had worked there, and my grandma had worked there for God, like sort of 30, 40 years. And so, you know, it would be fair to say that if I kind of told you that off the bat, you'd probably make a judgment that I should be quite financially astute and that I've come from a sort of good financial background. However, despite this, and despite going to work in the bank, in the first 18 months of working in the bank, I successfully managed to rack up over £30,000 worth of debt. Now, you might ask, how is that possible? And I had to sit back in more recent years, as I have become sort of financially educated, and ask myself the same question. So I've spent a bit of time doing some digging as to why these problems might be arising. And a lot of it actually comes back to sort of our core beliefs and structure of how the UK is built. So the UK government at the minute currently reports inflation at 1.4%. And that's probably within the last kind of months that data is relevant. But probably what a lot of you don't know is how inflation is calculated. And to put it quite simply in layman's terms, it's just about made up. Now, you might say, how is that made up, Sarah? Of course, there must be a really strategic calculation behind that. Now, what actually happens with the calculation of inflation is the government changed the definition of lots of things that make up the rate of inflation to keep the rate of inflation artificially low. So if that sounds confusing, well, that's because it is. You know, the government are very good at purposefully trying to put us off things and trying to understand inflation, so we don't want to question it. So I'll try and give you an example of that in action. So it might be that one year the government include people who are unable to work for a disability in the unemployment rate figure, let's say. But then the next year, they take that same unemployment reported figure and it looks a little bit high. So what the government do is they decide to change the definition of the unemployment rate so that people who can no longer work for a disability purpose, they're not included in that figure anymore. So that keeps the reported unemployment rate down. And there are lots of different figures like that, such as the unemployment rate, that are regularly chopped and changed to mask the real rate of inflation. So what does that mean really, Sarah, I suppose is what you're asking. Well, what it means for you and I is that the real or kind of true rate of inflation is actually much, much higher than what the government report, well into the double figures, in fact. But what you guys don't see, obviously, is your salary increasing by kind of 15-20% hike every year, do you? No, of course not. And therefore, if you're feeling poorer over the last couple of years, despite maybe a lot of you have had pay rises or, promotions in that time, well, that's because in real terms, you are actually getting poorer because your salary will never rise at the same rate as true inflation does. And then kind of keeping along the same lines from an unemployment perspective, that's another big issue that we're facing. So the rise of unemployment in the UK, 2020 saw unemployment soar to over 5%, which was kind of a 4-year high, obviously due to the pandemic. And some of the kind of biggest household names, like even John Lewis and Topshop, they've made several cutbacks or kind of gone into liquidation as a result of COVID. But what that does mean is there's no real certainty anymore in holding this kind of so-called permanent employment job that people always clung on to, I guess. And the byproduct really of these issues that I'm talking to you about this evening is that most of us get stuck in this sort of vicious financial cycle. So we're continually racking up debt, then we remortgage and we refinance to get ourselves out of this hole that we've got in. And then we just start the process all over again. So we're consistently on this kind of knife edge with money. And for the majority of us, it just kind of goes on throughout our lives. And then just to really add insult to injury, something that I read recently is there's now also a strong chance that pensions are not going to exist by the time the next generation retire. And one of the main reasons or theories for that is that the government are consistently looking for new ways to raise money. They're always looking for more money to raise to be able to use for things. And there's even been a recent suggestion in Parliament that governments may be able to borrow money from our hard-earned pension pots in the near future, which is a very scary thought. So I kind of, for me, I just don't want our children, I've got children myself, and any future generations to get stuck in this kind of vicious cycle that a lot of us are living in at the minute, of this high inflation rate and kind of very low salary, and we're struggling to make ends meet when there definitely is another way. So you probably sat here thinking, who the hell are you, Sarah, talking to me about this subject? Well, as I say, my name's Sarah Flynn, and I am a property investor foremost. I'm also an entrepreneur and a business owner, and I've been investing, as I say, in property and also now commodities and equities for around the last 5 years. And I've been building sort of long-term, sustained generational wealth for my own family and for our future generations. And how that started and where it came about, well, like probably most of you, I was working in that sort of the arbitrary 9-to-5 role. Things were going very well. I had a really good position at Lloyds Banking Group, and there was absolutely no reason for me to leave that role. However, unfortunately, in 2016, I had some very, very tragic news that my 19-year-old brother sadly passed away after a battle with cancer. And more about that later, but one of the things that my brother had always spoken to me about was this sort of ultimate dream of building extreme wealth over a period of time, so that he could kind of live the life that he always wanted to lead and not have any money worries. And for somebody of 19, he had quite a sort of old head on his shoulders, really. And in that sort of turmoil of what happened with my brother, it really made me start to think, maybe there's some mileage in what he was saying. So on a bit of a whim at the end of 2016, I quit work. So mad or brave, whichever way you want to look at that. But I decided that I wanted to kind of really explore this idea that my brother had started of looking at better ways to make money, and also have money work for me and my family in the future instead of it being the other way around. So I embarked on a process of kind of spending a lot of my own money educating myself, firstly in property investing, because that's what I was particularly interested in. And I went on to set up a property investment business, and we now own a large portfolio in West Yorkshire. And then obviously went on to further educate myself through a series of private mentoring and books and online material in stock, shares and commodity trading and investing. So where am I now? Well, 5 years later, I am a fully fledged investor. So that's kind of my job, if you like. And it's given me the financial freedom. It's given me lots of quality time to be able to spend doing what I love most in life. But most importantly, what it's stopped is that vicious cycle of financial debt. And it's stopped my financial worries. So high level, that's about me and kind of where I have come from and why I'm so passionate about this subject of financial education today. So I've talked a lot about obviously the issues, and as I've said, what's the solution, and what I just sort of alluded to now, of course the solution has to be financial education, and that can take many different forms, but at a high level I really see there being sort of 5 key steps that we can take to prevent our own future generations from getting into the same financial ruts that we have. So of course it starts at home. So the number one point for me has to be self-education. So, for you guys now, there are lots and lots of free resources out there. There are books, loads of really great financial literature that I've personally read. There's websites, there's newspapers like subscribing to the Financial Times. There's the Financial Yahoo app that's brilliant, just gives you highlights about things in the morning, and all sorts of different knowledge that's out there, totally free, looking on YouTube, to get an understanding of how to make money work for you and how to invest it correctly. The second point would be about leading by example. So once you've built this resource base and once you've got the knowledge and the tools, then start doing it yourself. So putting it into practice, starting to build your own wealth, whether that's a bit of saving, a bit of, you want to buy a property for investment, whether it's you want to get some stocks, etc., anything like that. And then the third part, really key, and the whole reason that I'm doing this talk is then to be able to go on to educate your children and future generations. So whether that be sitting down from, depending on the age of your child, obviously, 10, 15 minutes an hour, whatever you see fit, and just having a really good weekly chat about money, being open and honest and educating them on the fundamentals of finance, really. And then the fourth part is all around educating others. So, speaking to your peers, speaking to people at the school gates, and speaking to other people about what you've learned. This really is about the Mexican wave effect for me, so the more people that we can tell, the more people we can help, the more people we can change people's lives to get out of that financial cycle. And then the fifth point, if you're feeling really crazy and passionate about it like I am, is campaigning for free education in schools. So they are the 5 key steps that I believe that everybody can take. They're completely free to do to start to change our financial future as a nation. So as I mentioned earlier, obviously at the start of the talk, I got myself into this £30,000 debt in an 18-month period, just as I started my working life. And whilst I was working in a bank of all places. And prior to that entrepreneurial life, as I said, I was like 95% of the population, kind of struggling to make ends meet. And at various points, I'd managed to rack up embarrassingly as much as £100,000 across kind of credit card loans, debts, hire purchase agreements, and that is absolutely no way to live. But yet, a lot of us live in that style. It is a way of life for most people. It's a sort of a culture that we've created, I think, in the UK, and to a degree it is on a global scale as well. We have seen that mirror kind of over in the US, and as I said, it wasn't until the death of my brother that I really got that motivation to be able to explore other ways to make money. But worse still, for me, what was worse is that when I did explore that avenue, I had to spend almost £50,000 of my own money educating myself on how to create sustained wealth. And that's not right either. This information to me should be free for everyone to access, and it should be taught from a young age, especially because being financially astute is obviously such a fundamental aspect of life. So to recap, as I say, the 5 key things that you guys can take away and do today are self-education, leading by example, educating children, educating others, and finally, like I say, if you're feeling crazy like me, go whole hog and please join me in my campaign for free financial education for schools. I am on a mission at the minute to get the financial literacy into the UK schooling system as a kind of permanent and mandatory lesson to ensure that obviously our future generation and future children are given the knowledge not to struggle financially. Thank you.
Wow, incredible. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that insightful talk. And